And we're starting with very, short comments on the incident, very, very sad incident that happened on Thursday, and I'm referring to the accident involving the presidential press corps when they were traveling back from the Volta region after the president had been there for a church ceremony. Joining us on the line, Suleimana Barima. He's Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa. Thank you very much for joining us, Suleimana.
Good morning, Samson, and good morning to all your panelists and your listeners.
Right. Thank you very much. A while ago, I was just going through the statement that Media Foundation for West Africa issued, commiserating with the press corps and particularly families of the dead Ghanaian Times newspaper journalist Samuel Nyama, and also those who were victims of that particular accident. Certainly, it's sad news. But from where you sit, what has to be said about the event?
Well, first of all, let me really state our of commiseration with the affected victims, and particularly the family of our late brother. I think that, as you have rightly said, it was a very unfortunate incident, but we have to say that, well, as it is, it was an accident. It does happen sometimes, unfortunate as the consequences can always be. People have raised all manner of questions, and I think that as a nation we are yet to have answers to them. Particularly, I think the first day when I was in the house and there was television shots of the incident, I had a colleague here whose immediate reaction was the car a trotro, and a friend had to say, no, it cannot be a trotro. It's a Ford vehicle, and the fact that it has this number that's often used for other vehicles does not mean that it's trotro. And many have also
I must admit,
said,
I asked the same question when I saw it on television.
Well, I think naturally that will be the initial reaction, and since then many have speculated that the car was rented, the car was not in good condition, and so on and so forth. I think those are legitimate issues that we need to interrogate. People have said, why? Are we saying that they should have been driving in a car made today or the very latest model of car? And are we saying that such cars cannot be involved in an accident? I think it is far from that. Even airplanes that go through the most rigorous kind of technical and other forms of checks sometimes get involved in accidents. But when they do, the whole essence of investigating such incidents is what can we learn from it? And that is, for me, the same thing that I would say about this particular incident. Unfortunately, colleague journalists are among those who are even speculating. Was it trotro? Was it a red bars? And so on and so forth. And I would have expected that these are, colleagues who have been involved in this incident. We would continue to have a presidential press corps, and it's important that we look at how can we advocate for increased safety for our colleagues who work with not just the presidency, but those who go on other state assignments. And that is why it's important for us to interrogate the issues and see what lessons we can learn from this. And I would have been expecting that journalists would be able to interrogate, investigate, and then give us answers as regards what was the condition of the car.
So let's take it that as we speak, the journalists are in the process of going through this investigation that you are asking. But should there be some other investigation beyond what the journalists will have to do?
Well, I think so, something. I believe that with every accident that happens, the police would normally conduct their own investigations, do testing of the car, and eventually come up with their own report as regards what could have been the possible cause. Given the fact that this is something related to the presidency, one is not sure the extent to which the police would carry out the investigation, and at the end of the day, whether or not, even if the car was not in good condition for such a high-profile assignment, whether or not the police would come up with a report that clearly says it as it is. And so beyond the investigations that can be conducted by journalists, I think that we would also look up to the police to see what report that they eventually come up with. But I think it's also important that media organizations begin to take the safety and comfort and welfare of their journalists and staff very seriously. And therefore, on these assignments, beyond that, we have had occasions where companies would mobilize journalists to go on a site tour to cover stories on what they are doing on their sites and so on and so forth. And quite often, there is no question about, okay, how are the journalists going to travel? Are they going by road or by air? And if it is by road, what nature of vehicle? What is the route that will be used? Is there an insurance cover for the trip, and so on and so forth? I think these are critical issues that media organizations themselves should begin to look at as they deploy their journalists to do various kinds of assignments.
Those who survived, at least about 2 of them have been talking to police about what they say. There were, 2 close, instances where they almost had shaves of accident before the accident really happened. We're told of Napoleon Atikito of GTV, for example, who has told police that the driver lacked experience and yet was speeding. So investigations will be necessary, right?
Definitely, I think so. At this stage, I think all these are, accounts from let's say, victims. Now, on what basis would Napoleon, for example, be able to say the driver lacked experience? He has worked at the presidency for quite some time now. So perhaps he knows some of the workers there and knows who is better at doing what. And until we have some verification to be able to establish that, this is a driver who just joined the presidential team just a year ago, or somebody who has just been driving for 6 months and was assigned such an important role.
It may be important to note at this point that there doesn't seem to be a doubt that that particular vehicle does not belong to the pool of presidential cars for the purposes of carrying journalists with the president, and that it was indeed rented.
Well, Samson, that makes it quite interesting. But I think that various ways of cross-checking that to establish it as a factual, something that is very factual.
It is reported that some of the journalists say that they got to the place and saw the vehicle. That is before they took off, and upon their own casual examination of the vehicle, declined to travel because they felt that the vehicle was not in good shape. It's not the kind that they ought to have joined.
Well, I think if what you are saying are eventually established as the facts, then somebody must provide some answers. I believe that there are people at the presidency whose job it is to facilitate, the movement of people, to facilitate how the presidential press corps carry out their duties, and so on and so forth. And therefore, such a person or such persons should be able to provide answers as regards why they had to go for a rented car, why they had to go for a vehicle. And as I've said elsewhere,
okay,
it's important for us to look at.
Now, let me double confirm for you that the vehicle indeed was rented. And the Minister of Communications, Dr. Omane Boama, confirms that it was rented. And it was rented because the van for presidential press corps was spoilt.
Oh, well, I think that's interesting. But something, I think the bigger issue is not with the fact that it was rented, because as you and I know, there are, many car rental organizations here, many of whom would provide, state-of-the-art vehicles, many of whom would make sure that their cars go through some checks and rigor. But what is important is what kind of protocol did this car go through before it was rented? Do we have, mechanisms for checking the state of vehicles before we assign them to, a high place as the presidency? And beyond that, when I saw the vehicle, I noticed it was registered in 2012. Many of these car rental organizations or companies do perhaps as we do. Those of us who are not that well endowed, we would buy a car, register it today. You see it as a 2015 registered car. But if you look at which year the car was made, you would realize that sometimes the car is about 10 years old before it was even brought in.
From what you know,
think that all these checks need to be done. And if indeed it's established that this was not a car that was in such a good condition as to be assigned to such a high-profile assignment, then, as I've said, people have questions to answer.
There are those who have already come forward and boldly say straight away, on the basis of what evidence that is available to them, that some heads must roll in the Flagstaff House, particularly those who are responsible for coordinating such activities, because there cannot be an excuse, first, to rent a car for the purpose, and second, to allow a driver outside of the pool of drivers who are used to a presidential convoy movement to drive, because those in such a position are taught various things, including what to do when there's a tire burst, for example. And so someone ought to be held for this within the president's media, managers.
Well, I think people who make that argument, indeed, if all these are established, one, the car was rented, so couldn't we have fallen back on any of the cars that belong to state protocol, for example, if the particular car that is usually assigned to the presidential press corps was down? Couldn't we have relied on any of, I know state protocol has many vehicles that they use for, all manner of assignments. Couldn't we have had that? Number two, if it is true that this was a driver who was even outside the usual, drivers in the presidential pool, then that is something that we need to look at quite critically. Beyond that also, yes, the car was rented, but what was also the state of the car is another issue. Because it is not just, we are not saying this just because it involves journalists, but even if it involves any other group or category of people who moves with the president, and this is what happens on the basis of somebody's negligence and on the basis of just doing anything anyhow, then we are not talking just about the safety of these people, but it's about the safety of even the president. It also gives an indication of perhaps the level of security, the level of arrangement, that protocol that these whole, because if we're talking about the presidential team, then it actually is about the president as well, not just because it's journalists. Even if it was just a group of state protocol officials and they rented a bar, the driver was not experienced.
Okay,
so
thank you very much, Suleiman Barima. But what you're saying is that you agree with those who say that we should not just simply call this an accident and the end of the story, and that's it.
Not at all, because if all these issues that you're raising and the confirmation the car was rented and so on is the case, then we need to really interrogate. Because as I said, it's about what lessons can we learn, who ought to be punished if somebody has to be punished, so that at least we are able to avoid some of these incidents. Yes, it's an accident, but could it have been avoided? All
right. Thank you very much. Suleiman Barima is the executive director of the Media Foundation for West Africa, which is headquartered here in Accra. Thank you very much. We're joined now by Barima Osei Asare Dako. It's been a while.
Yes.
Good to have you. Right. So, your very first comments on, what we are talking about now about the press corps and the accident. Kweku.
Well. It's a tragedy. Very tragedy. Condolences first to the family, the wife and children, and of course to New Times Corporation.
Right.
First, in the immediate terms, that's where the focus is.
Right.
Giving him a befitting funeral and burial, and also looking in the cases of immediate compensation, if anything, how to cater for the children and all the rest. He's such a young man. I'm not sure he had, and I may be wrong, decided to put down anything like wills and those things, Even some of us who are old are yet to do things like that because we don't anticipate we are going anytime soon.
We're normally very hesitant to do that.
Yes, I don't anticipate I'm going anytime soon. I'll be around for quite a long time.
Okay.
But unfortunately, here it is. We've lost a colleague. And I'm told very good journalist, developing, So it's so sad. And that can easily unleash some emotions in us and get us angry and ask questions and all that. All the questions being made are legitimate. All the questions being raised are legitimate. That there should be some inquiry into how the vehicle was rented, who rented it. All those things are legitimate. And I believe that even as we sit here, there are processes towards that effect, both from official circles and unofficial circles. I know journalists and things. Yesterday I was doing some little cross-checking that yes, that was a rented vehicle. It was rented from a private rental car company based at the Labadi Beach Hotel, So police will also go into all those things, the conditions of the car's insurance. So there's no way those things aren't going to happen.
Right.
Whether by officialdom or by the journalistic world. There's no way. And it will happen. But the focus right now, it's on the tragedy and its immediate consequences. What we should do to give our friend, brother, a befitting burial and funeral and take immediate look at the family's welfare, particularly the wife and children. Right. That's, for me, the focus. And I have not voted against the need for a legitimate inquiry into the other aspects.
And of course, the recovery of those who are still, receiving care at the 37 Military Hospital, even those who have been discharged as well.
Fantastic. I nearly lost focus on that, but that's very critical, so that's important. And it's still the logistics department at the Flagstaff House, an officer there did the renter and all those things are happening. We are all checking. Everybody, and many, I'm sure this media house, with its experience and track record, is doing the same thing. We would consolidate those things post the burial, funeral, and other immediate issues.
Okay. Kweku feels that we should wait a while to ask those hard questions, perhaps.
What I'm saying is that that's not the front line now, even though it's ongoing. It's already ongoing.
Okay.
So I have not excluded it.
Gabi, what do you say? There are those who say, outright, we ought not hesitate in saying that, number one, it cannot be the case, and it shouldn't have been the case that we had to go out and rent a car and use the driver of that car for the purposes of a presidential convoy. It must be stated that the accident did not happen when it was with the convoy. They had taken a lead. And so many other things coming up.
Well, of course, the questions will come up. If I may add my voice to those who have expressed condolences, and of course we also wish speedy recovery for those who are still unwell. I think questions will be raised. When I saw the vehicle, it was clear to me that it was more or less like your average trotro. That's what it looked to me. And
of course.
Yes, I'm saying, but you can tell. Sure. You can tell. And that worried me a bit. But like I said, we should wait and until we get.
Some say that shows a sort of a lack of respect for the journalist, value for the journalists who were going to cover the program. Because if all the other persons who follow the president, some of them actually unimportant, really, would get into V8s, why should the journalists not deserve similar treatment?
I noticed in 2012, for instance, there was a presidential candidate who actually got a new bus just for the press that will follow him. Because the fact is, these convoys drive at top speed, which perhaps they shouldn't, but they do. And to catch up, the vehicles must be good enough to do so, because you don't want this structural-looking vehicle, as I see, trying to catch up with a presidential convoy. It's a difficult task. And of course, also, a driver must be a driver who knows how to drive with the convoy. So there are all these things, but accidents do happen. I don't know the full facts, but like I said, just looking at the picture, I think, no, this vehicle ought not to be in a convoy that follows the president. How
important will be the testimony of some of the victims that the driver was cautioned twice because he was speeding?
I think that's important. I think that really it's important, and cautioning and speeding, and we sometimes keep quiet. But it's difficult to say. But clearly, the driver, did he survive?
We don't know his situation. Yes, he did. There's only one person who died.
Yes, so the driver survived. Okay, and of course, I mean, if he was reckless in driving, I'm sure the law would deal with him, and the law must deal with him.
Okay, thank you. Kofi, what do you say?
Well, let me say good morning. It's my first time on the show, and the last time we were here, there was a boycott, and today it's on. I think we also add our voice to the expression of condolences to the family, and it's such a tragic event. You get up in the morning full of energy, you go to the presidency with enthusiasm to want to go and cover a story for your institution and so on, and this is what you get. It's not good news enough. So the PPP will also add its voice to the expression of condolences to the family and so on and so forth. But I think going forward, there's been a number of calls for us to see how we take care of the family and the wife and the children. We will support, and I think if the GJA will take the lead, it will be good enough, and then we will do our best and contribute our quota to that. But I'm sure that the other issues that has got to do with what type of vehicle, who rented it, and how it was rented, and so on, I'm sure there's some kind of policy at the presidency, whoever is in charge of presidential fleet or convoy, as to, in case we don't have a vehicle in the pool for journalists to go, how do we go about it? If it happens
there was one available, but that had to carry the cameraman, and they had to get this one to carry the reporters.
There were 2 or 3 others that had problems.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. But this is apparently not the first time they've done that kind of exercise.
Rented. Yeah. It's not the first time.
Sure.
Yes. Yes.
But
so
is that acceptable, Kweku?
I would wish it doesn't happen. Presidency should have enough fleet to deal with such matters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so the point I was making was that if it had to be rented, what procedure do you go through? Does it have to meet a certain standards? And did we go through this process in this particular instance? So the investigations will go on, we'll learn lessons from it. But I think generally, when a person has a public figure, in this case in the media, journalists, we get a lot of attention, and then we focus on that. Let's do something, let's investigate. But it happens to so many other people who may not be in this kind of category, if you like.
He was attempting to overtake some others. And what you find some of the reporters who went, their concern, again, is that this is respect for them, because at least they ought to have an escort, and they don't have an escort. And this is why he had to find his own way in trying to overtake others. If they had an escort, he would have cleared the way for them. And these are the lines of responsibility that they want somebody to take at the Flagstaff House. Some of them have been sending messages to me and complaining about all sorts of things.
Yes, but what kind of vehicle was he overtaking? Is it part of the convoys, or is
No, he was not with the convoy. They had finished the job. The president and his team were still in the region, and they had to take the lead to come back to
and do their job. Okay.
and then do the news. So they took the lead.
Yeah, so it brings into sharp focus also the entire processes of presidential outreach programs. So you go, you finish your program, how do we come back, what is the procedure, and so on and so forth. And normally they come with the president back, with a police escort, we see them all the time. And sometimes when you even see, they happen to be the last bus, they are struggling to catch up and so on and so forth. So if the procedure exists, we should look at it if there were breaches. If there is no such procedure, we should take advantage of this situation and put some in place.
Okay. We've been trying to see if somebody at the Flagstaff House or the Communications Ministry will clear up one or two issues and also be able to say whether or not they ought to take some blame for what has happened. Well, normally this is what happens in this country. We cry over what has happened, and the next day we forget everything, and we just begin to move on.
How old was the vehicle?
It's a 2012 registered vehicle. I don't know that.
Yes. 10 years old.
Yes, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. But do you know whether during the reign of President Kufuor, there were times where vehicles had to be rented for the press? I've heard somebody, some newspaper editors who are sympathetic to the NDC say it never happened within the Kufuor regime, and that they are hearing this and they are very worried about it.
Well, like I said, I mean, I wasn't there. I didn't really hear that from my correspondent at the time. Remember, I was an editor of a newspaper. But there'll be one or two instances, at least one instance where I think the vehicle was not enough, so some journalists were left behind. But at least they didn't go to rent a trotro. Okay. So that I do know. I don't know the details, but what I do know is that on these convoys, you have to make sure that the vehicles are top notch. I mean, you know, I've seen presidential convoys that they use Ford Expedition for journalists because they know that it has the strength.
Yes.
You know, I mean, Akufo-Addo was using a car that was 1 year old.
And I was sharing with some friends that
for journalists, and the journalists who traveled with him will
I was sharing with some friends that there was an occasion where we're going on a campaign tour within the election period, and you know, we had to join. And when we were shown the bus that the journalists had to, you know, board, I didn't like it. I just said, I'm not going.
Which candidate was that?
Either I join one of those V8s or I won't join the bus.
Which candidate?
And I was allowed to join one of the V8s.
Which candidate was that?
I won't say that.
Please do.
Okay. I won't say that.
I know it won't be my candidate.
Okay. Now let's get to find out what is happening within the health front. The doctors are back, and they are going to start work. They are going to release, as it were, all services, begin to perform all services from Monday. And that's according to a press statement they issued yesterday. So from Monday, they are restoring all services. The question now is, how do we ensure that we don't get to a point where they go back on the strike because they have not gotten what they were asking for? No conditions of service have been signed. They insisted that until and unless the conditions of service have been signed, they were not getting back to the wards. They are back. How do we ensure they don't get back to the wards? And let me start with Kofi. What do you make of the situation now?
Well, I think it's good news. All of us were praying for the doctors to return. The last time I watched the show, you were asking the Deputy General Secretary, Justice Youngson, that are you going to go back? Are you going to go back? And he was still insistent that they have to get what they wanted. We just are looking at what is it that they wanted. It's a very simple one-sentence thing they're looking for, assigned documented conditions of service.
Right.
And they have submitted their proposal as to what they want. As to whether they will get it or not, that is not the matter. But there needs to be some negotiation. They have suspected that government has been dragging its feet on the matter when it was submitted for consideration, and they have been threatening. It didn't start this year, and the last time they had to give a deadline was for June 30th, and when all of us were scared that something like that was going to happen, They met the Minister of Finance, Minister of Health, and they gave a month postponement. And we have gone back and forth, and we have taken a whole month, and we have not been able to come to a certain agreement. Looking at what happened during these 3 weeks period, there are so many things that points to our ability to manage crisis. And sometimes we get too political and try to bastardize anything that needs to be taken care of carefully. How did it start? This whole thing was the leakage from the presidency of what the doctors were demanding. And we have been listening to how government communicated.
They were on strike before the conditions of service was leaked.
Yeah, but what led to the strike was that they were not getting the responses. The negotiations were not concluded. And they had not even, I remember Dr. Jansen referring to you, that how did you get a copy of government's response to their proposal when he or the GMA didn't have it? So
no, he had it. On that day when we were talking about it here, he had his copy. Yes.
No, but why did it get to some people first before the intended recipient? So we had not managed it properly. It's good that today we have the doctors going back. And like you said, what are we doing so that they don't go back to the strike again? Now, what the threats that were issued, the government responses and so on, the other issue that legalities and your strike is illegal and you have to go back, we will not pay your salaries. All those things, it's obvious that it didn't help, and that is not what was going to solve the problem. At the end of the day, we were happy that the Labour Commission that everybody was hoping would step in has stepped onto the plate. We hope that they are seized with the matter competently to resolve it. And they should be fair. I'm sure the GMA has gotten judgments before that went against government, and that by the same Labour Commission that the Honourable Minister for Employment, Harun Idrisu, was referring to with so much alacrity and enthusiasm, let's go back to the Labour Commission, as if they have always implemented decisions of the Labour Commission. And I think it's so strange. That lack of candor and faith in negotiation is what will put an organization such as GMA on the other side and not want to come to the table. But all over the discussion, you have realized that the GMA has been committed to the process. They have made serious concessions. These conditions that they are looking for, if it's arrived at the negotiation point, was supposed to be effective 2015. They have conceded that giving government a concession, let's start January 2000.
They've been on strike for over 3 weeks. They have not gotten their signed conditions of service. They are going back. So what happens to the wasted time, wasted lives, really? What happens to that? Does that not further the arguments that they should not have gone on the strike in the first place because they are prohibited by law to do so?
Well, I do not want to go into the legalities, because if you listen to the doctors, and they are right, that if when it comes to whether somebody has acted illegally or not, government it's as equal offender, more guilty than they are. So we shouldn't look at their decision in the light of the law and so on and so forth. But I think the strike, even though unfortunate and undesirable, have gotten some responses from government, some awareness that they need to act and find a way to resolve the issue. And in all these matters...
Well, there are some people who still hold to the view that it's not about government having done anything or whatever. It's because they are afraid that they were up to lose their jobs and that their strike had lost traction. You know, many people were not really happy with them. That's why they're going back.
No, I'm not sure. You see, they are human beings, and the last time there were outpouring of emotions and so on. And so many people, I'm sure, have spoken to them. And there have been suggestions, some of them have done it openly. And there have been suggestions that the president himself should intervene, not in the open, some backroom maneuvers and so on and so forth. And I'm sure the doctors know that there are some personalities that they respect and they regard. And if the call has been that go back to work, government is ready to negotiate, and there has been some attempt. And the Labour Commission meeting has taken place, and there's been given some assignment to go and work on and report back to the Labour Commission and see how it proceeds. they've gotten some of the attention that they wanted to bring to bear on the things that we're looking for. So
now, Kweku, this is what they say is part of the major reasons why they are going back. They say, and this is their statement, that the National Executive Council of the GMA, in its deliberations, took into consideration the appeals by the ordinary Ghanaians, the wise counsel of certain eminent individuals and some credible organizations, the intervention of former heads of state, Otumfo Osei to the second, the Asantehene, Osajifo, Amwetia, Oforipenyin, Ochehene, the Christian Council, Catholic Bishops Conference, the Pentecostal Council, Association of Ghana Industries, AGI, the National House of Chiefs, the Peace Council, the Trade Union Congress, the Ghana Health Service Council, the Parliamentary Select Committee on Health, and sections of the media. It is the hope of the GMA that all these people who have intervened will not relent on their efforts to ensure that doctors in this country get their conditions of service to forestall future occurrence of this industrial unrest.
Yeah, well said. And I'm happy they have responded positively to this critical mass of public, well-intended appeals to them to resume full service. It's really instinctively, I do not believe in retracing, going back, look at all those issues. Of course, they give an account of some of those things, and I think it was legitimate within context, you know. But the most important thing now is to focus on the negotiations. I would have wished the suspension of the strike relative to the outpatient and emergency services was to take effect today rather than Monday. A lot could happen between the 48 hours that this whole strike appears to be standing. Maybe they can appeal to the guys that, look, even though we said 24 hours, they can begin to go, okay, over the weekend, especially those that are immediately available, because it's critical. Many things could happen in between the 24 hours and 48 hours that extension they've given. It's just another appeal I'm making. I'm just a small Ghanaian. You know, why 24th August? Why not today? Because of the nature of the job that they do. But now the focus on the negotiation. You see, the category 2 and 3 allowances, I realized they were unable to agree on the format to use in dealing with it. Government was insisting on the thing being done within the public service, this joint standing negotiating committee, because they didn't want to create some discrepancies and things in view of the fact that other public service workers are part of it. Well, the doctors make the point about some public service workers appear to be even enjoying those category 2 and 3 allowances. But I cited a document that showed that in terms of category 4 allowances and others, government and the GMA had all been doing concessions and arriving at some compromises. I'm sure you've cited those documents. So it showed that there's a certain basis for, you know, arriving at a compromise solution. Now, there's a need for flexibility, creativity, innovation. I'm not sure we should, you know, that public service thing. Whilst I see the logic, I see the rationale, I see even some wisdom in trying to do things within a framework that would embrace all groups, so for consistency and cohesion and coherence. When you are confronted with certain peculiar situations like we are today, because of the fact that the doctors perceive that body as having failed for almost 5 years in delivering results, and already government is engaged in negotiations with the GMA, yes, proceed to work out even category 2 and 3, a certain package that you can eventually integrate into the larger framework. Otherwise, we'll come to a stalemate. Whilst you have done something, you would have done something about category 4 and arrived at certain things as a matter of goodwill and showing good faith, and for that matter, moving the process forward. If we get stuck up again on the category 2 and 3 allowances because it must be done exclusively and strictly within the Public Services Joint Standing
Negotiating Committee.
Would have arrived at a stalemate, a cul-de-sac, and this whole thing can come back. So creativity, innovation, and flexibility becomes critical. Use tactics, find a way, deal with them on category 2 and 3 as well. The package, you find a way of eventually integrating it. After all, we are all talking about 2016 budget, is it not?
That is so.
And I'm told that even that proposal came from government and the doctors conceded. If I'm wrong, you can correct me onto that. So I think that, yes, good sense now. We should cut out the emotions, cut out the insults, as they are saying, cut out the propaganda, allow those who are doing the negotiations to focus. Look, this thing was costly. I don't believe 500 people died as was put out there. It came with no serious evidence. I think that didn't help anybody because people died, they die in hospitals. And if it's attributable directly to the strike of the doctors, it will be documented. I didn't see any such evidence back in the so-called 500 deaths. I didn't see it. But some deaths did occur, and even one is critical. Right. So I concede. But the point really is that I, as a matter of conscience, and I've made this clear, I don't support strike action by doctors. I don't. It's a matter of conscience, not just the law.
Okay.
I'm a conscientious objector, quote unquote, when it comes to industrial action by medical personnel, including doctors. But not that I don't understand their issues and their grievances. Thank God we've arrived at this end. They've withdrawn, they've suspended the thing. I plead with them to go back rather today than Monday. And all sides should focus and get us a solution.
Thank you, Kweku. Now, Gabi, there are those who already are saying, look, both the doctors and the government side should get experts to lead the process. The doctors, more importantly, they should not be going there themselves and doing all of the negotiations. They should get experts to lead the process. They should stay away. Just give their instructions to their consultants.
Well, I think that is helpful. I mean, if they find it useful, they will do so. And in really, you are negotiating, but doesn't mean you have to do it yourself. So I don't want to get into that because I'm not too sure if that is the issue. I think the issue is really about government's own predetermined plans for the budget in election year. I think to me, that's more the issue than anything else. Because if you listen to the president, he initially thought that what the doctors were seeking for, implementation was to begin January 2015. Okay? So on that, he went on to make certain assumptions about not having the money, budget is not there, out of budget. And then it comes out that it is actually for 2016. And then the improved proposal that government takes to the table is worse than government's original proposal. So it tells me that this is a party that is not ready to negotiate. Because when you bring an offer or a counter offer, which I refuse, I expect that either you bring the same offer back and try to make me understand, or you improve the offer. But you don't bring an offer that is, if you like, puts me in a worse off position than the original one that you brought. So I think we should be looking at it from that point of view. And in any event, and I think Akufo-Addo made that in the statement that he issued, he made this point. If you look, I mean, a lot has to do with the IMF on how we use our money in election year, okay? But when you look at the IMF conditionalities, if I can call them that, it makes an exception of two major social areas, i.e. education and health. And when it says that freeze employment, employment comes with what? Why are we freezing employment? Not because we don't want people to work, but because we know employment comes with emoluments. So when it says that freeze employment generally, but don't let that affect education and health. You know, it must be from that basis that even the organization that we think that feels that we have been reckless in how we're spending our money and should be a bit more strict, disciplined, and the rest of it, recognizes that education and health are two areas that you can't really be too tough. You know, so even on that basis, you expect that government will be a bit more forthcoming than it has been with the doctors. But of course, government has its plans. I mean, if you look at a document that was released from what's Haruna Idris's ministry, look, let me just read it. August 12, 2015, Youth Enterprise Support. There's a letter to a branch manager. Dear Sir, the bearer of this letter has been selected as a beneficiary of the Youth Enterprise Support Initiative launched by His Excellency President John Dramani Mahama. We will be exceptionally grateful if your bank will assist and open a current account with a registered business name of the bearers to facilitate funds disbursement. We commence and finalize extensive discussions with GCB Bank, blah, blah, blah. Now, it has begun. Where we got to in 2012, because even things that were not in budget, government decided to Asontoba, blah, blah, RAG, Zoom Lion, and all these payments of all these schemes that were done specifically to buy votes. They've started it again. You know, so you have a government that its priority is what is it that I can do to stay in power.
There's a program and a project that is going on. And there are letters in federance of those projects. And you are saying this is to buy votes.
I'm saying that, you know, but we've seen it.
No, I'm saying that the interpretation you give to the letter you just, portion of the letter you just read, might be unfair.
But I'm saying that this has been done all towards election year.
No,
it's taking them 3 years.
The government has to be working.
Oh, but I'm saying that it has its plans. I'm telling you, government has its own plans on what it wants to use the 2016 budget for. And this is
because we have an election coming up, government should not continue to pursue this project.
But government is telling us that because we have elections coming up, it doesn't want to pay doctors what they are looking for in terms of their conditions of service. That's what government is telling us.
Okay.
I mean, effectively.
Well.
But of course, it knows where it wants to spend our money. And this is the sort of thing that I'm talking about.
Very interesting comments there by Gavi Asare Ochri Dako. You're still here on Newsfile, brought to you by the candid sponsorship of MTN. MTN is everywhere you go, and you're welcome to the new world of MTN. Is brought to you by Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner. Sasso Spray is fresh and powerful. Star Assurance, creating smiles since 1985. And they've been celebrating 30 years of solid partnership. Lipton Tea, the #1 tea brand, and Yamvita, that is the delicious way to grow. Now, we deliberately want to move on from revisiting all the matters that came up as far as the doctors' strike is concerned. The ultimatum that was given by the minister, they have referred to all of those as threats. The intention of bringing Cuban doctors, employing retired doctors and everything, they have very strong words about all of those things. But we feel that now that they have called off the strike and they are returning to work, like Okubaku said, it may be unhelpful to revisit all of those issues. I'm saying this so that you avoid repeating the text messages that I've seen already about whether or not the doctor's position had been weakened and that they had no option than to go back and all of those. Thank you very much. We will take a break right here. When we return, I'll share with you your comments on the first two issues that we have looked at, and then we will zoom in on whether or not there should be a fresh electoral roll, and also later whether DCEs should be elected. Professor Kwame Nyahoe and Dr. Callistus Mahama say that is not going to be helpful. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile, your most authoritative news analysis show, and the Minister responsible for Employment and Labor Relations, Haruna Idrisu, joins us on the phone lines. Thank you very much, Haruna, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Samson, and to your very distinguished resource persons. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great. Very good news that Ghanaians are waking up to today, especially last night, that the doctors are going back because a lot of things have happened behind closed doors. What is most important for people is to know whether or not they would get, signed conditions of service in good time enough so that they don't go back on strike.
Undoubtedly welcoming news, as you rightly stated, that we all that medical doctors are back to do what they are calling expects them to do. And for us as government, we have indicated that once this action is over, we will reopen and commence negotiations in earnest with the GMA and other health workers within the delivery of health services generally in Ghana. Let me use this opportunity to thank all meaning Ghanaians, our chiefs, the clergy, Council of State, a section of the media, and the GMA leadership, at least for calling off the action and getting back onto the table. Social dialogue is a right path, even though a difficult path. And I'm sure through dialogue, through consultation and negotiations, we should be able to reach and build harmony on many of those issues. I have accordingly conveyed same to my colleague Atu Forsen, Minister for Health, Secretary, for us to convene on Monday at 11 a.m. to continue the process of negotiations. And I'm guided by some of the public comments, some of the comments of a section of the media. Category 2 and 3 allowances, because of the relativity, is negotiated within the Public Services Joint Negotiating Committee. But references are being made to what has happened to other institutions, in particular the security agencies. We are looking at it. I'm aware that negotiations have commenced. Smith Graham of the Fair Wages and Salary is a chairman of the PSGNC, and we are confident and hopeful that by 30th September, we should be able to put a closure onto this matter. Let me assure the Ghanaian people that this administration, the present Mahama administration, will bequeath to all health workers a codified signed conditions of service. What we need is for all of us to change our body language and posture in the spirit of give and take to be able to resolve many of those differences. There are some.
Oh, too bad. Lost Haruna Idrisu on the line. Please get him back on the line so that he takes one or two questions. But obviously, heartwarming, and people must be excited about the news that not only have they called off the strike, but you are getting ready to meet them Monday at 11 a.m. to begin talks towards sealing a deal, and that you're hopeful that 30th of September they would have signed conditions of service. Yes, thank you very much. You were making a point where we lost you.
Yeah, Samson, I was just reiterating the point that the present Mahama administration is committed to bequeathing to all health workers a codified signed conditions of service to guide their employment and their relationship with their employer. So the principle is not in dispute and not in doubt.
Right.
It's just the nuances of it. I'm sure we are just on chapter 4 of 12th chapter document. And as we make progress on it, where we are looking at, we are giving ourselves by 30th September, and I was indicating that the Public Services Joint on Category 2 and 3 is already negotiating. Informed that either yesterday or day before they met, and we have given them deadlines and timelines to meet. Indeed, it's the expectation of government that this year, general negotiations on base pay, minimum wage, and others, we should be able to conclude by end of October, so that the Minister of Finance, as was noted by your panelists, will factor this into the 2016 budget statement and financial statement. So I was expressing my gratitude to all well-meaning Ghanaians, our chiefs, clergy, and all of you,
right,
and those who particularly share the view that a strike action by doctors, whether short or prolonged, is inimical to the delivery of healthcare services in the country, and we should find a way to negotiate even doctors out of, it's part of the things that can be part of their conditions of strike, that you cannot be on strike, you cannot go on strike. But what do we do to compensate for it? I'm sure some more national debate on the matter would be useful.
The law already provides for that, except that we have to make sure that we follow it. I need to get your view, your point on this. You sought to activate the provisions of the Labour Act, that for as long as they were going to be on strike, the period that they were on strike was going to be, they were not going to be paid. Is that still in force?
Essentially, when you are building bridges, you need to change your posture on many issues. We all swear to uphold the law. As Minister for Employment, one of the critical laws that at all times, which must be my guiding Bible, is the Labour Act. And therefore, we must all be seen respecting our institutions and the laws of the country. I do not think that any medical practitioner will suffer as a result of the action that was embarked upon. The consequence, regrettable as it may be, I'm sure we need to make a forward move.
We have applied it to the teachers before. We took away their salaries because they were on strike. Well, in this situation,
where it is necessary and compelling, we will have no hesitation in enforcing it.
Right. Somehow also, additionally, we were bringing in the Cuban doctors. We were told that about 177 were expected. How soon, or have they already arrived?
Essentially, we want to build rapprochement, so we will further engage with the GMA. I think that the issue of the Cuban Medical Brigade have been largely misconstrued. It's an ongoing relationship between the government of Ghana and Cuba. And therefore, there were a section of Cubans who were due to travel back home. And in the face of this imminent crisis, in order to save lives and property, it was government's decision to ask for them to stay for an additional extended period whilst we continue the protocols that allow them to come in to complement the delivery of health services. Government is still committed to that relationship with Cuba and will continue to deploy them, particularly even to rural areas. I know that we have some advice even from the Ghana Health Service as to what incentives are we providing for medical doctors who would accept posting into rural deprived. Otherwise, the hinterlands that many of them may be reluctant to go. They are all issues that we may probably be putting on the table if we are able to reach a consensus on this matter.
Thank you very much indeed, Haruna Idrisu.
And I owe you a personal apology. When I see, I'll tell you.
Don't worry. But if you could stay on just a minute. Are you still on, Haruna? Okay, because I thought that it would be fair to get a reaction from him on the letter that Gabi Asare Chirdaku read about Yes, and which is seeking some money from certain courtesies, which he interprets to mean that it's campaign funding that is being, sought for the political campaigning season. Right. We'll move on now. Let's take some.
It would have been fair for him to say no.
It would have been fair to hear him say what the intention really is. All right. Let me read some of your messages. The reason that the doctors returned was due to appeals. Is just, okay, these are some of the text messages I will say that I'll exercise my right here not to read so that we don't get to aggravate any more issues and referring to Austin Gama and the rest. Ibrahim Kopa in Tamale said the decision by the doctors to go back to the ward is in the right direction. However, the government should not characteristically go to sleep by leaving the demands of the doctors unattended to. That is critical. Emmanuel Agbleta in Ho says, Samson, it has come as a huge relief to the suspension of the 3 weeks industrial action by Ghanaian doctors. While commending them, I wish to state that they should waive their hopes of this government because they are notable for their empty promises. It is only God who can remunerate them enough. 21 gun salutes to the doctors. Spike in Ohio says, I salute our doctors for calling off the strike. However, I urge them to continue their looter behind closed doors for posterity. Harris Musa says the assumption that the doctors' return was due to appeals is just, okay, I will not read Harris's message because I think that is provocative. That's mine to make. This one says, from Mahe Bamba, says, I am a victim of the doctor's strike and I'm happy they are back to the wards. The government must do everything possible to meet their demands because matters of health are non-negotiable. Thank you very much for those messages.